Okay. I think everyone in this room pretty much knows our guest speaker. Um, and those of you that don't, I'll give you a brief explanation as to who this dear soul is. Um, Dave has certainly been a lifelong observer, becoming interested in about the age of 10. So he's been looking up for a very long time. He has been awarded by our society on several fronts as well. He's received the Simon Newcomb Award, the Service Award back in 2015, and when I was president in 2020, I had the great honor of announcing that Dave was also now a fellow of the RASC. So he has some distinction. He's served a couple of terms here at our center as president. He's served as our director, and he certainly has served and is currently serving as auditor for our center. Um, he's also been involved with Nova East for many years in various capacities on the committee, presenting talks such as the one he's doing today, and also doing workshops at that one. And this is a presentation that Dave did do this past August at Nova East when we were at Blomidon. But we felt it was intriguing enough and interesting enough that we wanted the membership at large to have access to his talk. So he is invited today to do just that. So without further ado, I give you Dave Chapman to present Celestial Birds, Their Lore and Wonder.
Everything good audio-wise? Good. How do we advance? Do I tell you what I? Okay. Is there some kind of hand signal I can get? Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me. For those that are seeing this for the second time, I apologize. But when I woke up this morning, I didn't have anything to do. And then I got a phone call at 10, would you come in and step in for speaker? And I gulp. And I said, yeah, because, I gave the talk pretty recently and it's pretty fresh in my mind. So here I am to give this talk. And I'm glad to give it because there was a small but very select audience in August. It was a terrible weather. I went up there. That's maybe about 15 or 20 of us. But today it's going out. I think more people are going to be able to see it. Plus, I guess it'll be on the video version. So I'm happy that this talk will get out into the world. I worked on it. I thought about it for quite a while and then worked on it for a bit. And I hope you'll enjoy it. It's a pretty light talk. It's not really heavy. The inspiration was that we were going to do this stars and birds Nova East theme, and we were going to do it 2 years in a row. The first time it got canceled, and then the second time we just said, well, let's use that theme again. And I said, well, I could do a talk on the birds that are in the sky, the celestial birds. That's where the idea came from, and so here we go. By the way, if you want to find out more about my projects, you go to my link tree down there, and you'll find out all the different things I do. So this talk is in two parts. The first part is a bit longer than the second part. So the first part only deals with the official constellations of the International Astronomical Union. Now there's 88 official constellations. They were codified back in the middle of the 20th century. They are all based on sort of Babylonian, Grecian, Roman kind of lore, and the myths that are involved in that lore. Those constellations got expanded when Europeans explored the southern hemisphere and added a bunch of relatively modern ones. Out of those 88, there are 9 celestial birds, plus one honorable mention. And it's the honorable mention, which I think is the kind of the cool thing about this talk. But you won't miss it, I'll let you know. But I don't think it's right for me to get up and talk about constellations in the sky without acknowledging that around the world, there are many cultures who look up at the same stars. They don't always see the same patterns, and so they create their own patterns, their own constellations, their own myths. Everyone around the world seems to project their myths and stories onto the stars because, in a sense, back then, the sky was their big screen TV, right? They didn't have TV, they didn't have computers, internet, they just had the sky. And so they used the sky to play out the stories that they told from generation to generation. I can't possibly cover all of the bird-related constellations and all of those cultures. But as you recall, I mean, last month we had Charles Ennis talk about the World Asterism Project. So if you're interested in other cultures and star stories that involve birds or anything, go there. There's not enough time to cover everything. But I will touch on a couple of things, well, maybe three. But one is Moon and the Seven Bird Hunters, because that's a local story of the Indigenous people here. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I found out about some Cree constellations, because that material is fairly easy to access. And I'm going to talk about Maori from the Southern Hemisphere, a Maori bird constellation, which I discovered while I was doing research for this talk. So the part one. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I guess there's 8 IUA constellations plus the honorable mention. So I'm going from high declination to low declination, because for us here in the Northern Hemisphere, they're the ones that are at high declination are the most visible. So the first one is Cygnus the Swan, plus 45 degrees. The second one is Lyra, plus 35 degrees. Everybody says, wait a minute, Lyra is a harp, it's not a bird. However, the reason it gets an honorable mention is because in some stories involving Lyra, there is a bird involved. Okay, so that's why there's an honorable mention there. Then we have Aquila the eagle, which is basically on the equator, celestial equator. Not many people know that. So interestingly enough, those 3 constellations are very prominent constellations in the summer sky. And this talk was very much directed towards summer observing. So we're exactly in the wrong month now, but you can get ready. The other couple that are easy for us to see here are Corvus the crow and Columba the dove. Well, they're not really easy to see because they're at -20 and -35. We'll get to that. The remaining ones are basically invisible from here, and they're all in the southern sky. The crane, the phoenix, the toucan, the peacock, and the bird of paradise. They're all in the southern hemisphere. They're all not that big, and they were all added in, when the Europeans moved were exploring the southern hemisphere. So that's the kind of the roadmap. So one of the things I'm going to try to do in this talk is not only talk about the constellations, but I was trying to get people to observe the things in the constellations. So here's our first list of things. All of these objects here are in the Explore the Universe observing program, which is like the intro, the basic observing program for the RASC. You don't have to be a member of the RASC to get that program and get a pin and a certificate. It's open to everybody. But here are some Explore the Universe objects. So I think I got them all. All the ones here are the bird-related ones in Explore the Universe. So in Cygnus, the Cygnus and its principal star Deneb are objects that you can check off in your observing program. And Albireo, which is Beta Cygni, is a beautiful double star which you can observe in binoculars, and you can observe that to explore the universe. Omicron 1 Cygni is a really interesting triple star in Cygnus. And Judy and I have a history over this, which I won't go into, but every time I bring it up, I always think of Judy. Anyhow, we had fun finding that one. Well, looking back, I got a little frustrated. I mean, what's the matter? You can't see it. Anyway, finally she saw it. Anyway, 16 Cygni is another double star. All of these are binocular objects or naked eye objects, so easy to do, right? Too bad it's not summer. And in Lyra, we've got Lyra and its principal star Vega, constellation star. There's the Epsilon 1 and Epsilon 2 Lyra, which is a multiple star. In binoculars, you can see the double. You would need a sort of medium power telescope to split the double to get 4 stars. And you have to have good seeing, but that's kind of a neat object to zoom in on. And then there's Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 Lyra, another double star, and Delta 1 and Delta 2 Lyra, another double star, all in Vega. Oh, sorry, all in Lyra. And in Aquila, all we have is the constellation and the star. There aren't any, well, not in Explore the Universe. I'm not even sure there's any object in any of the RASC observing lists in Aquila. I might be wrong. Someone with that, eh? Of course you'd say that. He's the dark nebula guy. I asked him once, how come the dark nebula don't have magnitudes? Anyway, it took him a while. Next one, please. Okay, so summer triangle. Again, the top 3 bird stars are bird constellations are Cygnus, Altair, and Lyra, and their stars are Deneb, Altair, and Vega. D for Deneb, Altair, A for Altair, VE for Vega, spells Dave. So this is also known hereabouts as the Dave asterism. Now you might ask, why does Vega get 2? It's because of the double, right? So it gets two letters. Okay, I had to correct. Charles had he said he's putting it into the and I had to correct him. I said it's D-A-V-E. It's not D-A-V. It's D-A-V-E because of anyway. He got it. So. And of course, that makes those 3 stars of the summer triangle or the Dave asterism. It's always a lot of fun to point those out. Interestingly enough, we call it the summer triangle, but in the fall, because it's so high up in the sky, in the fall, as the fall progresses, it gets darker earlier. And so in the summer, you have to wait up till 10 o'clock at night to see the summer triangle. But then you get into September and then you can see it at 9 o'clock. And then in October, 8 o'clock. And you can see the so-called summer triangle quite late into the fall because of the fact that it gets darker in the fall. Quite interesting. Next, please. Okay, let's get into some of the details here. I took these pictures from a book. It's the book of constellations that I have is by Ruckel, the same guy that did the moon book, but he also put out a nice constellation book, and I grabbed these images from his book. So Cygnus, the swan, if you look into the mythology of Cygnus, there are actually 2 different stories about Cygnus. One of them is about, I think they're brothers, Cygnus and Python. And right now, I can't recall how that story goes, but you might want to look that one up. But the more common one is where Cygnus represents Zeus, who disguised himself as a swan, came down to Earth and had his way, let's say, with a mortal woman. Now this little story gets played out multiple times in Greek mythology. So it's a pretty common thing that Zeus would do. Normally in classical art, this is often depicted as Leda and the Swan is the name of, you can see all the people have painted this, this story. Anyhow, that's a PG-13 story, okay? The other ones, I think, is a little more family friendly. So we've already mentioned Deneb, which is Alpha Cygnus in ETU, Alberio, Beta Cygnus in ETU, colored double star. A real crowd pleaser at star parties in the summer because of the contrasting colors in the stars. Omicron 1 Sigma, I've mentioned already, triple star. Where is that? That's up here. So here's the Northern Cross here. Omicron 1 is this. I think some people get mixed up. They think that Omicron 1 and Omicron 2 are the star in the ETU, but it's not. Omicron 1 itself is a triple star. So you have to be careful with that. Make sure you get it right. Moving on, Messier 39, which is up here, is in the Messier list in the RASC Messier certificate. And there are some finest NGC objects. The North American Nebula, NGC 7000, Veil Nebula. You see lots of photographs of these. If you're trying to do these optically, they're a bit of a challenge to see. You know, you need to have a really dark sky, and you need to have a big aperture telescope to really to see them. I lie. You can see the North American Nebula in binoculars because it's pretty big, but you do have to have a dark sky. If you're in any kind of light pollution, forget it. You won't be able to see it because the eye itself is not very sensitive to the red light. The cameras we have today pick that up, and people give you these wonderful pictures with red, but our eyes are not that sensitive in the red. Some people seem to have more sensitivity than others. Blair McDonald, are you out there? No, he would look up and go, "Oh, I see it." You know, I'm struggling. And there's something called the blinking planetary, which I think it has the impression that it's changing magnitude. I don't know if it's real or not. I don't think it's real. I think it's just some kind of optical thing. So that's, I want to point out one thing. There's a star down here called Gienah, okay? And that means wing. That's the wing of Cygnus. So note that for later on, because that's going to come up again. So here's some pictures courtesy of David Hoskin of Alberio. Omicron 1 Cygni. So here's the little hockey stick, you know. I think that's Omicron 1, or maybe, I don't know. Not sure which are which, but there's a little hockey stick when you get them in binoculars. And Alberio, that's a pretty good picture. You have to be careful not to overexpose it, but you can see the color here in David's picture. This isn't the greatest impression on this screen, but you can see the bluish and the sort of the golden color there, especially in the diffraction spikes. The stars themselves may be a little bit oversaturated in this particular picture, but anyhow, lovely colors. Now, Vulpecula, the fox. I know, it's not a bird. I know it's not a bird. However, it isn't a bird. However, I'm including it for two reasons. One, it's really close to Cygnus, and there's a really cool thing to look at in it. But also, the fox has a goose in its mouth. Alpha Vulpeculae is called Anser, which is goose. So another honorable mention. It's like a bird, you know. So it's a fox. Not very, as a constellation, not very spectacular, but it has a really cool open cluster here called the coat hanger, which you can find when you go to Cygnus. The way I tell people to find it is to find Altair and find Alberio and look about a third of the way along in your binoculars, and you can pick that out. That is in the ETU, so that's another nice object to find. And then another one, the Dumbbell Nebula is here. That one's a bit tricky to find. I usually find Sagitta, which is the arrow, or Sagitta. Anybody have any ideas on that? Sagitta. So there's an arrow. You go to the head of the arrow and kind of go north, and you can find the dumbbell between that star and that star.
Is the goose a single star?
I,
Some First Nations, a single star represents a character in our.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't remember seeing anything about it being a double star. So I think it's just a single star.
Just one star to represent the goose, not two or three.
Well, it's the goose that's in the fox's mouth. Okay, so the constellation is the fox, and the fox has got a goose in his mouth, so he gets one star. He's not the main attraction here. So, I'm sure there's a story about that. Anyhow, let's see next. Did you go? And I didn't notice? Okay. Aquila the eagle. Interesting. Eagles seem to play the role in Greek mythology. They're like, in Greek mythology, they're like the couriers, like, UPS, or what are the other ones? Anyway, they're like the couriers. The gods use them to carry things around because they're fast and they can grab things. So they're always sending eagles off to get things or to bring things back, whatever. So anyway, Aquila was a servant to the gods, and there was this young boy named Ganymede, and he was dispatched, guess who, by Zeus, to abduct Ganymede and bring him back to Mount Olympus, where he ended up being their servant. I won't go into that anymore, but you will find on old star charts, you will find depictions of Ganymede in the pictorial thing. You'll see the eagle, and then you might see, sometimes it's Antonius, the name Antonius. It's very complicated, but you'll see sometimes in the old star charts, you'll see a young boy, right? So Altair, we've already mentioned Alpha Aquila. It's in ETU, as is the constellation itself. And then we have another Bernard E. Is a well-known dark nebula. It's in an observing list in the handbook, but it's not in observing certificate, as far as I know. So maybe that's something we can work on, certificate.
Deep sky challenge objects are good too.
Okay, yeah. I didn't go there. Yeah, that's the hardest one ever, right? You're doing them now, right? How close are you to being finished?
Well, historically, I had about 30 of the 38 done, but I've been redoing the entire list with new scopes. So
Wow.
about a third of the way through.
Wow, impressive.
He's talking about what?
The Deep Sky Challenge.
Deep Sky Challenge observing certificate. It's
Wanted to make sure that.
oh, okay. Oh, right, because they can't hear him. I have to remember that. So yeah, it's in the Dark Nebula in the handbook, and there's nothing to stop you from observing those things in the list. Just because there's no certificate, the list is published, and it's a good list to try. But you have to have a dark sky, because you're looking for something that's dark in a dark sky, and you have to be able to see the stars that make it the contrast, that make it dark. So it's very tricky. I just noticed that there is a couple of NGC objects in there, but they're not in the finest. So there's not a whole lot going on in Aquila. I do have a story about this. I think it was Jeff Donaldson at SCO, and he was like, I'm getting tired of looking at all the same objects, blah blah blah. What you got any ideas? I said, well, why don't you look at Bernard Z? And he said, well, it's not in my database or whatever. I said, well, I'll read out the coordinates. So I read out the RA and the deck, and he zoomed his telescope over, and he took a single frame, and there it was, bang, E, right in the middle of the frame. So he got it. So it's a good reason to have your handbook on you, because stuff like that isn't in all the databases on telescopes. Go to telescopes. Okay, next. Okay, here's the really cool one in my estimation. Lyra the harp. So the harp The harp was created by the god Hermes. Now, I'm always giving like the really bare bones part of the story. I mean, there's a lot more detail than what I'm going to say because there's no time to tell all the stories. So if you're interested, you can go read up on it. You may recognize Orpheus. He was the guy who went to Hades to get his girlfriend back. And it didn't turn out well, let's say. But he had his harp. So what happened was, I don't know why, but Hermes decided to gift it to Orpheus, who is a mortal. He's not a god. Hermes was a god, created the harp and gifted it to Orpheus. The courier, as I mentioned before, was a vulture or an eagle. I'm not sure. But so he gave the eagle the harp and said, take this to Orpheus, okay? Now, the main star in Lyra is Vega, which is Alpha Lyra. And if you look up what that means, you will actually find different definitions, but it refers to a bird, a swooping vulture or a falling eagle, something like that. There's so many different stories, but it has nothing to do with the harp other than the fact that the eagle or vulture was the courier. And the other interesting thing about Vega is back when they were setting up the magnitude scale, they decided that, okay, Vega is going to be magnitude 0.0. Done. And then everything went from there, okay? It's not the case anymore. They have a different, more like physicsy definition of magnitude, but Vega, I think, is maybe 100th of a magnitude off zero. But it is the old standard. So if you want to know what a magnitude 0 star is, look at Vega. Oh, so there's another star in Lyra called Sheliak down here, Beta. What's that mean? Well, it means harp. So inside Lyra, the main star is named after a bird, and the second brightest star is actually the harp, named after the harp. Gets pretty interesting, eh? So we've already mentioned that there's many double stars in Lyra. Epsilon Lyra, Zeta Lyra, Delta Lyra. There's a couple of Messier objects, the Ring Nebula, and a globular cluster, M56, which I think, if I recall, M56 is the globular cluster that looks least like a globular cluster. It's very irregular. Am I right about that? Yeah, you look at it and you say, what? This is a globular cluster? Because they're supposed to be round, but it's a bit off. So, okay, so here's another story. This goes to our Quinn Smith, our member in England. Is Quinn still a member, actually? I'm not sure. Is he still not signed up? So Quinn, when he was doing the Sky Tour, he said, well, what we want to do with this constellation Lyra, he said, we've got an idea. He said, we're going to go to Tim Hortons and offer to change the name of the constellation to Tim Horton because it has a donut and a double-double, okay? And he said we could get all kinds of money. We'll get a corporate sponsorship, and we'll change the name to Tim Horton. Anyhow, I didn't catch on for obvious reasons. So you might be thinking, Chapman's making this up about the vulture, the eagle in Lyra. He's making it up. But I have a bunch of reproductions of old star charts at home. I've got a kind of a collection. They're not real. They're like pictures. And all of these star charts, they go back, we feel that might be of Eastern origin. So the oldest one I have a copy of is Appianus 1540, which goes back a long way. And then there was a guy, Hood, Bayer, Blow, Celarius, Allard, Van Kalen, then Reiner, Oten, Barlow, and Bode, 1801. All of these celestial charts, which are kind of like this, like fancy pictures and colors, and they all depict a vulture or an eagle associated with Lyra, like this. See here? There. That's the bird, and he's carrying the harp. So this is just one example. All of these other ones have that. This is a big revelation to me. Interestingly enough, since 1801, I could not find a single star chart of any kind which made any reference to a bird or a vulture or an eagle. And in no astronomy book that I've seen, does anybody mention it? It's sort of dropped, it's just kind of dropped out of the lore somehow. And I think it's an interesting story I think there's more to it. And I think it would make an interesting article all on its own, just why all that happened. Not many people know that, of this connection. So we'll move on. Oh, wait a minute. Remember Aquila? He's called Antonius in this Ganymede, right? There he is with his little bow and arrow. And Aquila is coming down to grab him. I didn't make that up either. Okay, now Corvus the crow. Another kind of like the eagle, like a second level, a second rank courier, the crow. So Zeus told told the crow, go, I need some water, go get some water from the river or whatever. So he goes off and he takes his time, doesn't get back very soon. He makes up this big story about battling a water snake, which is Hydra, which is underneath here, and comes back and lies to Zeus about what happened. Zeus gets angry and he exacts revenge on the crow. Now, we know crows as black, and they have a very screeching, awful call. Well, before that, the crow was white and had a beautiful call. Zeus made him black and took away his nice call and made him into a caw song. So that's Corvus the crow. There are, there's a finest NGC there, the antenna galaxies. I think those are the interacting galaxies, and then there's strings of stars coming out. Okay, so that's in the finest NGC. Algorab is one in the relatively new double star program. So there's a few things there to observe. This is a spring constellation. So Corvus is this one over here. This is Crater, which is the cup that he was supposed to bring the water back. And the other thing I want to mention, struggling to find things to say about Corvus. The red dwarf star LHS 2520, which is real, near Gienah, has planet Krypton home to Superman in pop culture, okay? So that's a real red dwarf star. Gienah, did you notice that? This constellation also has a star named Gienah. And when the IIU was organizing things, they said, we can't have two stars with the same name. We can't have two stars named Gienah. So now, technically, this star is named Gienah Corvi, whereas Gienah Plane is in Cygnus, okay? Aren't you glad you came? Next, please. Columba the Dove. Now, this is the most difficult one. Columba the Dove is a winter constellation. You could maybe go out and see it tonight, but it is pretty far down south. It is at, between minus 30 and minus 40. So it's like, you'd have to have a good southern horizon, because not only is it below Orion, but it's below Canis Major and Lepus. So Puppis and Pictor and so on are considered southern constellations. And this one's on a little bit on the edge, but it is a dove. It's a bird constellation. And it was in, Johann Bode put it in Uranometria. There are no observing targets there for obvious reason, because it's so hard to see it. There is a black hole and an exoplanet, but they're not observing targets. So I think there's some view that Columba is the dove that was, it might be named after the dove that was released by Noah after the flood to go out and see if there was any land, but I'm not sure about that. I mean, columba is the Latin word for dove, right? Okay, now the southern birds. How are we doing for time? Are we okay? Okay, good. Because after this, we'll do part 2. So the southern birds, I'll go very quickly. I'm not going to go through them in great detail because we can't really view them from here. So there's no point in going through them in detail. So I've got this, again, from Ruckel's book. Here's the polar constellations in the south. And you can see that Apus, Pavo, Tucana, Goose, and Phoenix are all kind of bunched together there in the southern sky. So with increasing difficulty of viewing them. Phoenix is like the most northerly one, I guess. It's -50, right next to Achernar, which is at the end of the river. Eridanus. Eridanus is this long constellation, starts up near Orion, goes down below the horizon, and ends up at Achernar, which means, can anyone guess? The end of the river. Okay. So when I go to Cuba, I often look for that star. I always look cool, like look for the end of the river. So there's not much more to say. Well, maybe there might be one more slide on these. Here's I think they're all in here. Here's a pictorial representation. This might be mirror reverse because for some reason people used to do that. They would make mirror images, like as if you were not looking out, but looking down. I don't know. Anyhow, so Pavo is a peacock. Goose, what was goose? Crane. A toucan is a toucan. Phoenix is the one that rises from the ashes, right? It consumes in a flame and then a new bird comes from the ashes. Did I get them all? Yeah, they're all there, I guess. Okay. Now I'm going to do part 2. So I'm going to be talking about the Moon sky story of the Mi'kmaq, a couple of Cree. So in Cree, Niska is a goose and it's Cygnus. You can kind of see that, right? They don't see a swan, they see a goose. Makes sense? There's a couple of other constellations, the summer thunderbird and the winter thunderbird. To be honest, I have never really figured out how to draw those from the stars, but according to Wilfred Buck, there are these summer and winter thunderbirds. And then the last one we're going to talk about is Keruru of the Maori. So Wilfred Buck has a few books and videos online. He got the Keelak Award in 2023 from the RASC in Casca. So that if you want to learn more about the Cree constellations, look for him. And then there's the World Asterism Project, which you could lose yourself for hours in that. So here's, this is the one from here, Moon and the 7 bird hunters. I'm not going to tell the whole story for a couple of reasons, but the main reason now is that it takes 15, 20 minutes to tell, and we don't have that kind of time. But it's online. If you want to go online, you can see it being read out and illustrated. And I happen to have one extra copy of the actual book, which is in Mi'kmaq and English. So if anyone wants my second last copy, because I kept one for myself, I'll sell you that for 10. While we're at it, I did bring in some of the Mi'kmaq Moons books that Kathy and I did, if anyone's interested in those. These ones aren't signed, unfortunately. I'll sign it for me, but I haven't gotten them through Kathy. They're just books. You want to hold out for a signed one, maybe we can figure that out. So the story of Moon and the 7 bird hunters takes place involving the stars of Ursa Major and Bootes in the Western tradition. And Corona Borealis is kind of a side character. So if we just go through the characters, I think if we click here, they'll come up one by one. That's Mooin's back. That's the bear. So the bowl of the dipper is Mooin or Mooin's back. Next one is the robin. The robin is so the bird hunters are chasing the bear because they don't like the bear in the woods and they're hunting the bear. The robin is the one that's on the chase. The second one is chickadee, which is Mizar, Gigi Gaze, and in the story, chickadee's holding a birch bark pot, which is the other. It's Alcor, and he's got a birch bark pot that they're going to cook the bear meat in after the hunt. If you want to know how you can cook something in a birch bark pot, ask me after. I won't explain it now. Next one is the gray jay. Don't ask me to say that one. Just allocate. Then we jump over to Buute, Sagina's passenger pigeon place. They're extinct now. They've been hunted almost the world round. There's no passenger pigeons anymore because they're easy to hunt and good tasting. So people would just kill them. Then there's the blue jay, TTS, and then two owls. Cuckooquays, the barred owl. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? No, that one. Cuckooquays, barred owl. And the saw-whet owl. Goopquedge. So those are the main characters of the story. And what's Corona Borealis? Oh, go back. Corona Borealis is the den of the bear. That's where the den spends the winter, okay? It does have a name. I don't have it on this slide, but there is a name for it. Okay, so move on. And here's a picture that I took at, guess where? Our favorite spot in Kedemkujik with the pine tree. And you can see, there's all the stars. A live picture that I took with all those stars. One of the things, go back, please, sorry. One of the things that I did when I was out there one night was I sat out after sunset and the blacks were with us. And I sat out there in my chair and after sunset and I made a note of when I could see each star coming out, how long it took between sunset and for the stars to come out. And I was trying to get those timings because the way this works in the morning, they do the opposite. They fade away. And there's something in the story about that the fire watchers, they tell the story in the morning, not at night. And they're staying up all night and watching the fire, and they tell the story in the morning. And then in some references, it says like 2 hours before dawn. And I'm like, well, how do you know when that is? So I just kind of worked it back. And it turns out that 2 hours before, let me think now, is it first light of dawn or 2 hours before actual sunrise? It might be 2 hours before the first light of dawn, as we just mentioned it. That's when the stars start to disappear. Okay, so that's the time of the morning. Like that's the latest you could tell this story because all the stars are visible. Okay, now we can move on. Oh yeah, if you want the full story, you can go to our Mi'kmaq Moons page. There's also a link tree. Okay, here's the last one. Karuru wood pigeon. So Karuru is a New Zealand wood pigeon, and it uses the southernmost stars of our. I was going to say the bottom ones, but down there is the upper ones. I'm saying the southern ones. And so south is up here. So the belt of Orion is the perch on which the wood pigeon is sitting. And I guess the sword of Orion or whatever is the snare. And Rigel is the berry, which is the bait for the wood pigeons. So the thing is, the Maori would hunt these birds by setting a snare and having some berries to attract the birds. And they would, and then they'd have them for supper. Puanga. What is Puanga? Oh, that's the name of Rigel, is Poanga. And the rising of Rigel for some Maori, the rising of Rigel in the morning is the start of the Maori New Year. And when I say the rising, it's called a heliacal rising. So it's night, you can't see anything. Rigel rises and you can see it for a little bit, and then it disappears because the sun comes up. And that's called the heliacal rising, and that is the start of their new year. A few days before that, Rigel would be rising too late. A few days after that, it would be in the sky for a long time. So it's that instant, that one day when you can see Rigel just before the sun rises. That's the start of the new year. But go back. The Maori also, some Maori use the rising of the Pleiades, which they called Batariki. They use Matariki as the start of the new year. But if you actually go to like set yourself up in New Zealand and see what's going on, then basically Rigel and the Pleiades are rising at about the same time. So some groups use one and some groups use the other. Okay, so I thought that was kind of a cool story about the wood pigeon. And I think we're at the end now, ready for the question and answer time. My picture. North American Nebula.
Checking where.
Well, Keji. Probably at Site 15. Kuji. It's just a camera with an 85mm lens. On, I guess it was a tracker. I don't know how long I said. 30 seconds times 10. Yeah, I was tracking. Anyhow, any questions or observations or comments?
Anything from Zoomland, Bob?
Early on, the Fannings said they were very happy to have the opportunity to see this invitation finally.
Yes, well, I saw earlier that Lisa noted that it was taking place. So thank you, Lisa, for showing up, and I hope you enjoyed it.
So just as an observation at the Dark Sky Weekend in Kenny last year, they did a presentation on Newland.
Yes.
With they had props and
yes,
it was very lengthy,
yeah,
quite graphic in the dark because they had these glow in the dark figures and they involved children. It was quite interesting, very visually impressive, and quite a wonderful experience.
Okay, so Gary was talking about the presentation by the interpreters at Keji last year, which was apparently a very theatrical and impressive little play acting. I'm sorry I missed it. That was the first of the Dark Sky Weekend events ever that I have missed, and I'm sorry I did. Anyway, I'm glad to see that the people down there are embracing the story and bringing it back to life. That sounds like maybe they'll do it again,
Well, sure.
Yeah.
It was really well done. They had very good props.
Right.
And it involved participation by children who had been up on the circle. So it was just really well done.
Yeah.
Worth seeing probably more than once in my life.
So Gary's saying that, I guess I'm interpreting your words, but because they've invested a lot in the props and so on, it's very likely, and it was very successful, that it's probably going to be done again, especially where it involves children who come to the Sky Circle for an evening.
Apparently with these new mics, we can hear the audience.
Is that so? Well, wow. It was presented in English and in Mi'kmaq. Wow. I'm not sure Ursula has been there for the last few years, but I don't know because I wasn't there.
Gentleman interpreter.
Dave, one of the slides that you showed had, I think, the Cree and the
yes
brackets in Italy.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know maybe that's possibly their name for themselves in that language. I'm sorry, I'd have to look that up. But well, yeah. I'm sorry, I can't recall what that word specifically means. But in my defense, I only knew I was giving this talk. this morning, and I didn't have a chance to really review it. I'm winging it here. Okay, so yeah. So I'll look it up though. Now that you mention it, if I remember, which is unlikely. Okay, well, okay, great.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for stepping in, and yes, I'm gonna hug you for stepping in. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.